Good evening, and thank you for watching, viewing, listening to another episode of the Median Society. Tonight, we have a remarkable guest, one that has a passion and a heart for DE&I, with the emphasis on belonging as well. So many times we see that a lot of companies and organizations focus on DE&I, but they don't ever really talk about belonging. And they don't even focus on a specific area, more refined areas. Well, our guest tonight, Miss Nicole, definitely does just that. And we're looking forward to having a great conversation with her going forward. Let me tell you a bit about Nicole. Nicole has studied conflict resolution in business and has her master's in industrial organizational psychology. Her work has driven her to passionately advocate for equity, especially in regard to disabilities. She is an accomplished author, speaker, coach, and consultant. Through Nicole's studies and research, she has recognized that personality and communication were not connected. She realized that people communicate who they are if we listen to them. She believes that we can find ways to resolve conflict, connect, and communicate more effectively. Nicole has given several TED Talks, and we are delighted to have Nicole here on the Median Society. Good evening, Nicole. How are you today?
I am doing pretty good. I like to make good look pretty, so that's oftentimes why I do pretty good. You have to have a lot of humor with life, because sometimes life can be so challenging, especially when you deal with these kind of topics. And I want to say thank you, Anthony, for letting me be here. I am really excited to be here and to talk about these subjects, because a lot of times when we talk about diversity, we forget about accessibility, and that is a huge thing that we need to talk about. And a lot of times we don't, when we talk about personality, we talk about it from a behavioral perspective instead of talking about it from a processing perspective. And we have to go back to the drawing board and really start to listen to people.
It's interesting. When I was reviewing one of your TED Talks, and you go into a conversation even about loneliness, and I hope for us to talk about that a bit too. You're talking about your trip, I believe, over to India or another country. Phenomenal. And just listening to your talk, it just showcased how we're all interconnected. And if we only took time to get to know one another, we'd find that there's far more alike than different from in all of our situations. So.
Well, what was interesting is when I was in India, Google Translate didn't always work. And so you have to figure out how to communicate with people when you don't speak the same language. And I've had this happen multiple times in my life. And what was really fun is they had children. And so we got on the floor, and I brought, now I think that smelling markers are great. And I didn't think that they had them in India. So I had to make sure that they got smelling markers, because I remember growing up and I was smelling the great markers, and then you'd walk out and you'd have smelling markers all over your nose, and all of a sudden your nose is looking purple. And, and so I just remembered that. And so I brought that, and then I brought little cars, and we were playing on the ground. We didn't have to speak a language. We could play. And we laughed so hard at misunderstanding each other. And when Google Translate wouldn't translate things correctly, and how to figure each other out. And it was wonderful, because you could have humor with this.
That's a different way of thinking about it, because I don't even think anybody thinks about the humor side. Everybody's so caught up in the AI effect right now, and what AI, because obviously Google Translate and tools like that are learning consistently and constantly for the technology of AI. But it's interesting that you bring up about humor, and how humor as a communication tool is so important to us. It helps, lessen people's fear of one another a lot of the time. Wouldn't you say so?
Well, it does. See, so what happens is our brain, we're either wiring ourselves in joy or fear. We don't remember our day-to-day stuff, but we remember the things that make us afraid, or we remember the things that make us happy, or laughter or love. And that's why belonging is so key, is because belonging makes us feel happy. Belonging makes us feel good. That's why positive psychology was such a big thing there for a while, because we want to feel good, or we want to feel miserable, because it plays with our brains and our neurotransmitters. So when you have an experience, you're remembering it because it's either fearful or it's either pleasurable. And so this is where when you're having these kinds of experiences of belonging, if they're playful, if they're fun, and you really remember that belonging, is it's impactful. You feel loved. So belonging a lot of times will lead to care or love. And that's why that's also very important, not just in family relationships or friendships, but it's important in the workplace. Now people go, wait a second, you can't have love in the workplace. No, but you can have care.
This is true.
And that's where belonging is so key. And people go, well, that does, what about ROI? Well, I'm going to tell you, in 2008, this is the last real major statistics I saw, $359 billion was caused in conflict.
Wow.
So if you don't have care in your workplace, retention is going to cost you so much money. So care is huge in ROI, unless you want to hire robots, but then you still have to hire people to take care of those robots.
Yep.
So the bottom line is, if you don't have care in your workplace, you're going to have problems with retention if you don't have belonging. And if you don't have diversity, you're going to have problems with innovation, because innovation shows diversity. I mean, diversity shows that if you have more diversity, you're going to have more innovation. You have more care, you're going to have more innovation. You're going to have more profit. Those are just facts according to research.
Absolutely. Let's step back and let's talk a little bit about your career and what you've done with accessibility and bringing that to the forefront in the whole D&I and belonging and accessibilities. Let's talk about that a bit.
Well, so here I'm going to be very, very blunt with you. What has happened with accessibility in a lot of, we have diversity over here and we have accessibility over here. They have not really combined. And what happens a lot of times, and I'm going to be very, very blunt, we do things a lot of times from a white perspective. And so we don't look at accessibility a lot of times from a diversity perspective. Now there are basic little articles and research, but it's really culturally, we look at diversity. We don't go in when we go into employment and handle systematic racism with systematic ableism. And so it's really hard for people to understand what cultures go through when they're dealing with systematic ableism and systematic racism. So an overall general situation, a Latinx community is going to deal with systematic ableism differently than white culture. Same with Black culture, same with, and I'm talking overall, same with Asian culture, because I can't break it up individually. Individually, it'll be different. Like Chinese will deal with different than Japanese culture will deal a little bit different, but overall arching will deal differently with systematic ableism. So what happens is, currently I'm writing an accessibility program for the consulting division of DEI of the American Psychological Association. That's a lot to say right there. But what's happened is diversity hasn't dealt with the accessibility. So if you're already in the workplace, you have to pick and choose. I have a friend who said to me, I am a Black gay man with a disability, and I have to choose what bucket list I go into.
Wow.
So, and that should not happen. That should not happen. And then not only that, if you have a disability, you're going, okay, what industry do I have to go into that's safe for my disability? Because there are industries that are more safe for people with disabilities and industries that aren't. According to the CDC, people with disabilities have a 2 times higher unemployment rate. And from the research I've shown that Black men with disabilities have a higher unemployment rate when they have disability. So the highest underrepresented, I do not like the word minority because no one is minor. The only thing that should be minor is music, and that's minor keys. People are not minor. So please do not say that. I really don't like the word disability. It's differing capabilities. They just do things differently. I don't like people being dissed. I'm going to say that straight up.
Gotcha.
So our language, because people get afraid when they hear disabilities, they hear dis. When people hear minor, they don't think that it's important. When you hear underrepresented, you think, oh, they need more representation. So, and you'll hear this, I'm very big on language. So what happens is because we're not dealing with that aspect, then we're not getting the representation. The people aren't getting the representation that they need. And so there's different capabilities that people have. And majority of people out there, or there's a lot of people with differing capabilities that are quite capable that need a reasonable accommodation. And according to Society for Human Resource Management, 56% of reasonable accommodations cost employers $0. So if it's over half, why are we still having these issues?
So that sounds like people just don't want to do it because
Well,
there's no cost associated.
Yeah.
Wow.
They see it as if you can't, yeah. And reasonable accommodations or accommodations in the workplace aren't just a differing disability thing. It can also be women's health.
Okay.
We don't talk about menstruation, maternity, and menopause in the workplace. And that's a taboo thing. We don't talk about accent bias. That can be a thing. You know, I mean, how many times have you been on the call and you're going, oh my gosh, I can't understand this person? That can cause frustration for the person. So when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about a big range.
Gotcha.
It's just, it mostly focuses on people with differing capabilities. So that's where I'm really like going, okay, wait a second. We've got to start looking at this because it's really not that challenging. It's basically treating people with kindness and giving people what they need so that they can be successful at the job. It's not the way I look at accessibility is it's like a woman who is, or a person who needs you have two people. One person is 6 foot and can reach the shelf. The other person is 5 foot and needs a ladder.
Yeah.
But they both can do the job. One just needs a ladder. So are you going to say, oh, I don't want to work with you because you need a ladder. You're 5 foot.
That's a good way of looking at it. It's interesting. I worked years ago at this one organization, and I never thought about it from what I'm about to say. I never thought about it from this perspective. You know, two women, and I'll just use it from this example. Two women, both of them have kids. One of them had the kids naturally, was able, you know, they actually went through the 9 months of childbirth. Well, the other woman wasn't able to bear children, but they had a surrogate. But me personally, if I was there making a decision, I feel like both of them should have the same amount of maternity leave time. But the company I was working at that point, they didn't see it that way. And I remember one of them telling me about it. The one that had the surrogate was telling me about it. She felt like she should have had the same amount of maternity leave as well to be able to bond with her child. And I look back and I think about that. This was years ago, and I say, you know, she's right. She really should, because that bonding time is still important no matter how the baby is delivered on this planet, right? So it's interesting what you're talking about. That just made me think about that.
You know. And that's where that company really did not have a right to choose how the baby. That's like really overstepping the bounds. As you're talking about women, do you know that there are some countries that have menstruation days? I was actually at a group last night and I was telling someone this, and this woman looked at me. She goes, yeah, India has that. And she was from India. And I'm like, I know. I have a list of what countries provide it. Wow. And I know India was one of them. The United States does not have that. You don't use your sick days for menstruation days. You actually have places that have menstruation days.
That's interesting.
Isn't that wow? Yeah.
That just goes to show you, like, I mean, a lot of people, they'll look at, oh, America, their healthcare is this and that, and it's good and all that. But they don't realize that some of these countries are just way more advanced in how they think about women's health, men's health, children's health, and in general. So, I mean, that's interesting to even hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's dive into the needs languages. You have 4 key points that I was able to pull out. It said right, value, important, and control. How did you come to recognizing those as your 4 key points of these set of books that you've created?
So what we did is we went back to Hippocrates. So most personality is based out of Hippocrates. And then Jung came along and he added introvert and extrovert. And so that's where you get a lot of your Myers-Briggs and a lot of your Enneagrams from. But what we realize is most people are not going to walk around saying, hi, sanguine, how are you today? Because it sounds like a penguin.
Yeah.
and phlegmatic. I mean, I can't even spell those words, let alone say them. So we wanted more modern words to use. And so we realized that, when people are looking for the best, they're looking for right is looking for the best. And you're looking for what's right in the situation. So you're trying to solve problems. You're always thinking. And that's how we started coming up with this. And we wanted to have it be really fun. So
Mm-hmm.
what we figured is people, um, again, people need belonging. And so there are three ways people really process. We process through love, the way our body is, like physical, our senses, and then our soul. And so because you have your life force, your soul, and your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're connecting with people, these are soul ties. How do we create a soul tie? Well, this is through through belonging. And so this is what we figured with the niece languages. So we're 2 out of the 4.
Mm-hmm.
So how it works is, right are your thinkers. They are looking for the best, and it's inward. Then you have your V people. Those are your cost versus benefit people.
Okay.
They feel. So right thinks, V feels.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the processing. And then you have, and they're inward, and they cannot make, the V people cannot make a decision unless they can unless they can feel or see a cost versus a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is really challenging if they can't feel that, or if they can't see that. I is about the prize. They have got to have a prize no matter where they go. Everything is about the prize.
Uh-huh.
And then control is about the environment. They need their environment a certain way everywhere they go.
Hmm.
So what's interesting is, like, I was watching something. So all of us are really selfish people. I'm just going to be very blunt. When
Mm-hmm.
people are saying they're trying to control me, no, they're not. It has nothing to do with you. I'm really going to be very blunt about this. It has to do with, they want things a certain way because they think it's the best way of doing it. And they want you to do their way because they want it their way because it's the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with you. If you were a different person, they do the same thing with that other person because they think it's the best way. And this is where we've missed up the words controlling,
Mm-hmm.
with them trying to find the best way to do something. And so when we understand processing, then we can go to behavior. So one of the things we've noticed is, when we're 2 out of the 4, this is how you find this is how we figured this out. This is how you find your ideal person. This is how you connect in relationships. Well, if you bring this to the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
this also impacts workplace. So if you are not in alignment, so there's a difference between, I'm just going to give you an example.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm uh, there's RCs and RVs. So RVs and RCs are going to date, and they're going to meet in the R. If their R's aren't working, if their R's aren't in alignment,
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking of, like, they think each other's aren't, they're both not thinking this is the best. They're going to struggle. So think about that in the workplace. You both are not thinking this is the best way to do something. You're going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I give a really good political example. So Trump speaks important right, and Biden speaks right value,
Mm-hmm.
and their rights don't align. A lot of people
That's a good
don't
point.
use that example, but that's like a really good example of the two of them. Their rights aren't aligning.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like one or the other, their rights don't align, and that's why they don't work well together. Um, they're opposite. In Biden is opposite. He speaks uh, cost versus benefit is his other one. He processes that way. Trump is always looking for the next best prize. That's his other way of speaking.
Mm.
And so when we're looking at that, that's why he's been more unique as far as a president has gone. That's why when you're understanding how someone's processing, then you can work with it.
Okay.
You can walk away, or you can understand how to navigate people, or how to, when you have a conflict, okay, why is this conflict going this way? How are they processing? When you're opposites of someone, also how to save it. So if, let's say, for example, you have someone who is let's say we have someone who's an RC and they're with an IV, which an RC speaks best environment, an IV speaks prizes with benefits. They're not speaking the same thing. The IV comes in and messes the environment because they're looking for that prize. what happens is if they're both aware of the different way they're processing, they can now go, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Instead of being an offense and going, why can't you just be this way? Why can't you just do this? You also are understanding what people are more looking for, or why they, again, why they act the way they do. When you go back to processing, it also helps you rewire your brain out of behaviors you don't necessarily like. So there's a difference between alignment, meaning that you're both in agreement in this one area, and opposites, which is the opposites are where you're processing completely different.
Interesting. How well? So let me ask you this, because that kind of alludes back to your book, "Bring Balance and Belonging" series. How long? First of all, how long did it take you to make this whole series? Because it looks like your books, you go through one part with the workplace, parenting as another part, and dating as another part, and I believe there was another part as well. But how long did it take you to complete this whole series?
So it took me about 2 years, because what I did was as I wrote 4 individual books and then I put them all together. So I have the 4 individual ones I did in a year. And then the next year I put them all together in a bigger research book. So
Hmm.
if you want a compilation of all of them,
Oh
you
wow.
can get a compilation of all of them with even more research. What we're really wanting to do with this is we're moving more into the games now, and that was our whole goal to begin with, but we had to research this and really bring it in depth
Gotcha.
and have the training ready. And right now we've test played our for our young kids, because people know who they are when they're really young. I mean, I'm not kidding you.
Hmm.
I've talked with 3-year-olds and they go, yeah, I know I'm right.
Oh
I've
wow.
talked with young people know who they are.
Uh huh.
It's when they get older, they don't know who they are. I can't believe that when people are like, they're older and they're like, I don't want to be right. I'm like, what? Do you want to be wrong? Do you really want to be? I don't like that word. Like, really? What's wrong with being right? What's wrong with thinking for the best? I
Hmm.
don't like it. Well, what word would you rather me use? I don't know, but I don't like it. Okay. And so I notice younger people are like, yeah, I like to be right. I like to look for the best. Like, okay. So younger people are a lot better at accepting it.
Hmm.
What's happened is as adults, we have not allowed people to look for the best.
Hmm.
And we've really hurt that sense of development and training in the processing.
Hmm.
And and so what happens is, so I've developed matching games that we're just putting the label of the box on. It's for like kids like 3 to 6.
Hmm.
And then we've got another game that we've done one test play for. It's a board game, and we're doing more test playing, and because we've got to go back and fix a few things. But we've got a test play for a second game for just older people. And so we're going to be making more gameplay with the personality model. And that's what's important to us, because we really want people to play. And I want to let you know that part of the reason I developed this was because I have, I've struggled with interpersonal communication type things. And I think part of it has been I've struggled with some like neurodiverse type stuff, I
Hmm.
think, and I've had to learn the patterns of people and how do I communicate and how do I navigate this, and so I've, because of being in that world, because of having a learning disability, I now understand how do I navigate this. And that's why I developed this. I developed this partly because I want people to have healthy belonging. I want people to know how to interact with each other,
Hmm.
how to have health, how to interact healthy, how to when we reading, not reading people, but when we're connecting, when we're bombing, how do we save that? How do we walk in a room and find people to work with in a healthy manner
Hmm.
that creates that belonging, because a lot of us don't know, and if we aren't trained as children, how are we going to have that healthy adult relationships? So that's why I developed it.
No, that's amazing, and I mean that's it's interesting how people will be transparent. And in your case, you're being very transparent in why
Mhm.
you developed this. And that's what it takes. A lot of the genius things that have been developed in this world have been because people allow themselves to be transparent and say, hey, they're using themselves as that example on why the world needs this and that, as it's being presented. You know, that's awesome. Let me ask you this: when it comes to the dating and accessibilities, it's interesting. I remember this movie years ago. It was starred Wesley Snipes and Sanaa Lathan, and it was called Disappearing Acts. One of the things that struck out to me in that film years ago when it came out, and I had never seen this before, is that he began caring for a woman that had epilepsy. Matter of fact, one night they were laying in the bed and she started having tremors and going into a seizure. And with that, he didn't turn his back on her. That was the whole point of the story. He didn't turn his back on her. She even made the comment in it saying, at her as her character, she said, she goes, you know, most people run away or are scared after. That's why I don't tell them about it. And I noticed there was something you were talking about in one of your TED Talks in regards to the invisible disabilities, so to speak. And I know you don't like that word, but I remember you talking about it. Can you go into that a little bit when you're talking about the dating in your dating part of the series?
So I had interviewed someone for that TED Talk, and she had told me she had epilepsy and how difficult it was in dating. When people have an invisible difference, it is really challenging. So I've actually written on this in research. There's a difference between having a visible difference and an invisible difference. With a visible difference, you are dealing with society's beauty. So let's look at Sports Illustrated. People gave a lot of backlash when they put a full-figured model on Sports Illustrated. Think about Miss Wheelchair. Would they ever put Miss Wheelchair in a bikini on Sports Illustrated? What would happen? So these are things that people with physical disabilities deal with. They deal with a lot of body shaming, disgust, that kind of stuff when people aren't used to that. People shy away, especially if they never grew up with that. When you deal with something that's invisible, you deal with constant fear. Is somebody going to find out? If they find out, are they going to call me a liar? Am I going to get yelled at? Am I going to have to justify myself? If it acts up like a seizure, what's going to happen? Am I going to deal with embarrassment? Am I going to get taken advantage of? What's, should I disclose? Should I not disclose? When you're invisible, you have a fear of disclosure or not disclosure. I was at the, I think it's called Board versus, it was a landmark, Brown versus the Board of Education. I hope I said that correctly. And I was talking to a park ranger, and he said to me that I was lucky that I could hide, because I also had Jewish heritage, and my family hid that we were Jewish because of fear of anti-Semitism. And it's not a place of being lucky. You're in fear when you're able to hide. It's a fear of being found out. It's fear of being called a liar. And so that's the difference between the two. And a lot of people don't understand that. And you fight different battles. So it's a scary place to date, because a lot of times what ends up, I think the biggest thing is, especially with something like with epilepsy, you have a fear of, should I disclose or should I not disclose? And then if you're in the workplace, you may have to disclose to your coworkers. I actually was at a grocery store, and I was getting something at the meat counter, and the person was kind of acting dazed, and the coworker said he just had a seizure. Now, they shouldn't have told me that, but I mean, I'm pretty good about that. But they were protecting him, but they had to know so that when he had that, they could work with him. And his coworkers were fabulous around him. I was very, very impressed with how they handled him. But those are things that, how do you navigate that and still keep people's confidentiality? And how do you still be kind in that? Because a lot of times people aren't necessarily kind.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of it depends on how they go about what they've been exposed to before they get into those situations. And then a lot of it depends on how their parents raised them before they're presented with those situations. Because kindness can be taught at an early age, and it should be taught at an early age. But I think we're just in a world where people aren't taught to be kind, and everything is just so driven on being harsh or mean towards one another. And we got to get back to a point where we are kind, and that we're training our kids to be kind. I don't care what color they are. It's just we're in different demographics, different races, whatever it may be. We got to get to a point where we're treating people with kindness. So I agree.
Well, the biggest thing is you can join this camp at any age. You can join this camp at any age. You can have a different capability at any age. You can have a traumatic brain injury at any age. Yep. You can lose your hearing at any age. You can lose. I've known people that have all of a sudden. I was talking to a gentleman through business school at a college, and he was in the middle of flying a plane and lost his sight.
Wow!
Instantly. So I can tell you, you may not be around this, but and I'm not trying to get people fearful, but this is one of the reasons why sometimes people with different capabilities are the best people to hire, because we've had to learn how to navigate a world that's not meant for us.
Yes.
And when you cannot provide a simple, reasonable accommodation of someone having a lamp in their office or a quiet space, or even as something as simple as a ladder or a screen reader or some of the basic things people need, or a later schedule or whatever it is, you are missing out on some of the most amazing innovation that people can come up with, because they've had to learn to navigate a world that isn't for them.
Yes.
And there's a lot of highly intelligent people that cannot get education, that cannot get the things that they need because of the way our system is set up. I'm going to give my personal example of what happened with me when I got I've only had the correct reasonable accommodation once in my life. I went to school, and when they discovered my learning disability, I was a freshman in high school, and I tested as a freshman level in college in all my subjects, but I couldn't seem to pass my classes. So I went to college and I flunked out my first time, and I don't do testing. I have to do essays. I'm not a good speller, but I can put out the words, but I misunderstand things very easily, visually and auditory. So my bachelor's, I finally ended up passing and doing really, well. I finally got that done. But my master's, I did it in 6 months' time with honors and a learning disability. And the reason I was able to do it that quickly and that like it and to be able to do it like that was because they gave me the reasonable accommodation that I needed. Which what it was online school, and I was able to talk with my instructor and just understand what the directions were asking for. I'm the type of person that I will have my assignments done before everyone else will. I'm an overachiever, but if you can't explain it to me, the classes that I would struggle with most in the thing were when I wasn't getting my reasonable accommodation. And there was one other class I struggled with, but that was because it was shifting. There was too many shifts going on.
I got you.
I went from writing to doing statistics, and my brain was so focused on writing than doing statistics. I'm usually really good with statistics.
Gotcha.
But that's what I'm saying. When you give people what they need, they're going to flourish. When you don't give people what they need, and that goes across the board for everybody.
That's true.
It's giving people the pen and paper they need to do the job. And I was talking to a person last night about, he's like, we got to get things out fast, innovation, fast, fast, fast. And I said, because what happens when you hire someone and they're slow? I said, well, you're not looking at their talents. They may be more efficient and more detailed and get the things out that you need out that you may miss. And you don't want to go to market too fast and then miss a huge, huge thing. So everybody has their place.
Yes.
And when Gary Vaynerchuk, I think his name is, he's the wine guy out of New Jersey, says you hire people who when you have your strengths, who you hire people who Your weaknesses, they have that they're the opposite of you, basically.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what strength, you've heard of what he said,
yeah.
that
Basically,
strength,
they feel your weaknesses. Yep,
exactly.
yep. So
But we
how do we well, first of all, how do we change this landscape from the perspective of just from terminology to creating more of a inclusive environment? What are some steps that we can take? What are some steps companies can take? Not even just companies, but schools. What can they do? What should they do?
Well, I think schools, for the first thing, one, need to be open and willing.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I think what schools really need to do is they need to hire IOs, industrial organizational psychology
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
They need to hire IOs to come in and do workflows for teachers. They need to hire more people with disabilities. The problem is a lot of times schools are hiring teachers that have never had disabilities.
Yep.
And this is the problem. We hire people who don't have differing capabilities to work with people who have differing capabilities. Now, not all the time are people with differing capabilities going to know how to do that, but some of my best teachers have been people who have either worked with differing capabilities or who have had differing capabilities. So we need more education around how to work with that. We need more education around processing. So those are some of the things that I would suggest. Uh, but we do need more IOs in the
Mm-hmm.
field of working around for teachers, especially in education workflows. We also need more things around gamification and playing and learning,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that play.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with a gentleman that they are creating robots, and what they're doing with robots is they're making the control of robots joysticks, like
Mm-hmm.
what you would do like a PlayStation.
Yep.
That's brilliant. So we need more play, but we need that more with teachers, also with personality. We need our teachers to understand different personalities and why kids are rubbing them the wrong way
Mm-hmm.
and how to skillfully handle that. We need more things like dialectical behavioral things in DBT, which is Marshall Linehan taught that, or conflict resolution, Marshall Rosenberg. We need more skill based in schools because there's a lot more kids that are
Mm-hmm.
have trauma, don't understand fully how trauma gets handed down in the DNA.
Yep.
And we need to be working through that. We need to be offering that. One thing I really do wish that we would do is when kids graduated from high school, that we would give them a year of just, if you're willing to go to counseling and do some in-depth healing and in-depth discovery, that's not sending them off to college, or that's their first year of college. It's just in-depth healing, just in-depth
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
I just really wish that we would do that.
But you're right. You're right.
So yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
just
Because, I mean, you think about it from the time a kid is in high school, the amount of trauma that they collect, during just the middle school, high school years is absolutely crazy. It's just crazy amounts that they collect from friendships going sour, from, starting to date, that going sour, from grades and teachers, and just back to your whole point about personality and conflict resolution. That's it's I never really thought about it from this perspective, but what you're saying is exactly right. Maybe you give them a year, kind of like with how they go on that gap year, but you take that same
mhm,
principle, but let it be a year of self-discovery, you know.
yeah.
No,
Yeah, a year of
makes sense.
healing and self-discovery, where what college is it's just a year of where they go to classes of just self-discovery,
Mm-hmm.
classes of healing. Um, we have so many modalities out there that are fabulous that can heal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everybody has trauma.
Yes.
Everybody has trauma. It's been handed down in the DNA.
Yep.
And so we need to start healing that. And I can almost guarantee you, if you have people who are willing, we're going to start healing poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start healing. We will heal a lot of trauma. We'll heal a lot of our retention issues. We'll heal a lot of our workplace issues, and we're going to heal a lot of our health issues.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know why, and people go, well, we can't afford that. Well, we're looking at people as cost versus investment,
Good point.
you know, And we have to start looking at people as investment, because people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And they're going, well, they're living longer. Not necessarily. It's the traditionalists who have lived longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's not this current generation necessarily.
Absolutely. Yep. Totally agree. All right, Ms. Nicole, I thank you so much for coming to the Median Society. And we've already gained so much knowledge, and I look forward to having you on again, because there's things that you mentioned that I want to touch on even more, but we're going to stick to today's topics. You've been a great guest. Can you, as we always do at the Median Society, we always try to give you the last word. I want you to tell the audience what you want to leave them with.
I think one of my favorite sayings that I come up with that I just love, we never celebrate Dr. King's Aunt Day or Mom Day or Sister Day. But if it wasn't for the people that spoke into his life and that got that destiny going, we wouldn't have had the civil rights movement. If we wouldn't have had that, we wouldn't have had a lot of the things that have happened with the ADA. We wouldn't have had a lot of the movements we have. Nothing you do goes really unnoticed. And those seeds in his life created this huge tree that has created so much change. So when you're speaking into people's lives, you never know what you're creating and what impact it'll have for future generations. So always remember, your words are powerful.
Wow. Well said.
So yeah.
Well said. Thank you so much, Ms. Nicole. We appreciate having you. Everyone, to the Median Society audience, the needs languages. 4 key points: right, value, important, control. Some very valued areas. Please go out there and take a listen and look at her books. She has a series of them that conquer different areas, industries. You can reach out to Ms. Nicole. Do you want to leave them with contact information?
You can scan my QR code there on the screen. We also have some trainings that are coming out with the dating book and the parenting. I have one coming up with, I should have one with the romantic relationships up on the website. And the game should be out too when this comes out. And you can just click on that. Follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and LinkedIn.
That is so awesome. This game thing I'm super interested in. I love when people just become genius and create more games that can help train the next generation in whatever aspect. I mean, so that's awesome. Looking forward to your success on that. Thank you so much for viewing and listening to the Median Society.